Today, I want to talk about the current political elite in Kenya. Many people have identified that misrule, poor leadership, incompetence in governance is one of the main issues afflicting Kenya. It's the reason why the country continues to be poor. What many people don't realize is that exchanging one person for another to be president makes no difference. Even if you replace all the politicians, the country still will not thrive because the issue is larger than any one particular politician. Like, it's a systemic issue, and we need to do a deep dive into, what is this system that controls Kenya? Because once you understand the system that controls Kenya, you'll understand the problem. The problem is larger than any political party, any ethnic group, or any president. So Kenya, we have a particular system that was left over by the colonialists. And that system is called, people call it neo-colonialism. And where I fault the political leadership of Kenya is that they are aware of the larger systemic issues and they are fully compromised. They have sold their souls to support this system with the knowledge that this system is literally destroying many, many people. As I have said here before, poverty is violence against the poor. And the elite is more than willing to sell its soul and to sell the country just to keep its position and in support of, our national enemies. So today we're going to discuss, the Kenyan political elite. And we are going to discover why the Kenyan political elite is literally the worst in Africa. Now, before the Europeans, basically the British, before the British invaded Kenya, Kenyans, or the different ethnic groups that make up Kenya, had their own political systems, and each and every one of those groups had an elite within those groups. And what is interesting about the pre-colonial elites is that, unlike the current elite, the pre-colonial elite was very loyal to the people. They were so loyal to the point that they were willing to die for the people. And we have numerous examples of this. For example, when the British started their invasion in, I think, 1890, that's when the British brought their military expedition to attack peaceful and innocent people minding their own business. So once the military invasion began, one of the stories that emerges out of very many, I'm not going to cover all of them, I'm just going to cover a few of them. One of the stories that emerge is the story of Koitalel Arap Samoei, and he was from the Kalenjin family group. And he was an amazing man with an interesting history. And he was actually quite young. People think he was old. He was not old. He was actually a young man because he was murdered by the British when he was only 45 years old. So what happened with him is that he gave a prophecy, and this is one of the most interesting prophecies. He said that the day, he was talking to his people, he said, the day you see a serpent snaking its way through our land, spitting fire, that is the day our world will end. And he also advised that you have to resist. You have to fight the snake. You have to fight the serpent. Now, what is interesting is that, as you very well know, the Kalenjin in pre-colonial times had never, read the Bible, didn't know anything about the Bible. So it's interesting that he would refer to the Mzungu basically as a serpent, as a snake that is billowing, smoke and fire. Because it reminds me of what Genesis says, that there'll be enmity between the children of Adam and the children of the serpent. Now, once you understand that the descendants of Adam are actually people, African people who have this skin color, those are the descendants of Adam. And once you understand that the descendants of the serpent are people whose palms, whose bodies look exactly like the palm of their hand. So it becomes very interesting that, Koitalel would actually refer to them as, serpents, and give instructions that you have to fight to the finish. And the Kalenjin were loyal to fight to the finish, particularly the Nandi. And they fought until, until Koitalel himself was killed, literally murdered by the British. So you can see in that case that the elite, the government of the Nandi was very patriotic to the Nandi. They were willing to fight. They were willing to recognize that the invading Europeans literally were their enemies, and he was not willing to compromise. And he could not be bribed. He could not be talked to. He was like, we will fight until you leave our land. The other person that comes into mind is a lady called Mekatilili. And her full name is Mekatilili Wamenza. And she's from the coast. She's from the Griama community. And her history is also very interesting because she had lost a brother to the Arab slave traders. And so when the British began the invasion and started making, demands on the population, she went to the meeting where the British had called people for a meeting in order to demand taxes. Basically, demanding taxes meant that the British were demanding like X number of goats, X number of cows, X number of farm produce. And as far as she was concerned, that was highway robbery. And at the meeting, she was very vocal. And she opposed everything that the British were saying, the British soldiers were saying. And she led her people to take oaths and to resist. And the resistance was brilliant. And she's an amazing woman. I mean, think about it. She was very amazing. Because after that rebellion, she was arrested and she was exiled, I think in Kisii. And after 5 years of being exiled, she escaped and came back to her, her country, and led another campaign against the British. And then she was arrested again. And this time she was exiled to Somalia, to, a town called Kismayu. And after some years there, she escaped again and came back to Kenya to lead the fight once more against the British. So you can see she was completely uncompromising, fearless. She could not be bought. She knew who she was, where she was coming from, and where she was going. She knew who the enemy was. She was not confused about who the enemy was. And she was a woman. And then there's another interesting person that emerges more or less at that time. So in Central Province, we find a person called Harithuku, who by 1922 had already created a political party. I think it was one of the first political parties in Kenya. And he was actually very young. He was like, what? In his mid-20s. That's the time that he created this political party. So anyway, they were agitating against the British. They're basically telling the British to get out. This is as early as 1922. People are already fed up. And he was arrested. So what is interesting, after Harithuku was arrested, he was sent to prison. Not really prison, to jail. Now, outside the jail, there were some protesters who showed up. And the leader of these protesters was a woman. Think about that, a very young woman. She was called Muthoni. Now, Muthoni started provoking the men who were protesting not to run away, because they started running away when the cops showed up. So she embarrassed them and she demanded that they stand up and fight back. And unfortunately, as they were demonstrating, it was outside a hotel. There were some Europeans who were having, drinks on the patio of the hotel, and they took out their guns and started shooting at the women at point blank range. And the soldiers or the police also started shooting point blank at the women. So what is interesting is that majority of the soldiers who shot at the women who were protesting were Africans, who started shooting fellow Africans in support of the European settlers who were murdering our people while literally sipping tea. They were sipping tea while shooting people in the head. So unfortunately, this lady called Muthoni was killed on that day. And this was in 1922. So basically, what I'm trying to explain is that the elite that was there previous to 1930, it was a very different elite from the political elite that we find ruling over Kenya. The people who came here before, that previous elite, like I said, they were patriotic, they were willing to die to defend the people. They were not corrupt and they were not compromised. They knew who they were, where they were coming from, and where they were going. So that's the history of the pre-colonial elite.